It's not very often I find myself thrust into a documentary as the subject. But after receiving a $17,000 bill for services rendered within a 24-hour period, in deep reflection, I started to dissect the cost-benefit factor, the service provided, the quality of service. Who else had been bled with such hefty bills? All in an effort to determine if this bill was unreasonable. Instead, my curiosity led me down a path of steep research, an awe-inspiring all-access pass to a state-of-the-art intensive care unit, and a new appreciation for a private hospital which came to my daughter's rescue when it mattered most. So it's May 22nd, 2020, and her smile masked the tremendous pain she was enduring. She had an 8-centimeter fibroid growing at an alarming rate. She was 16 years old at the time and needed emergency surgery. As a parent, I felt my daughter's pain and recognized her fear of the knife. I was also conflicted because I knew that if she had to face the public healthcare system, there would be a waiting period which we could not afford. I also knew that by considering the private hospital, this procedure would certainly cost a pretty penny, a penny which I did not have at the time. But when it mattered most, we ended up here. Her doctor was Nadia Samuel, a gynecologist based at Tapion Hospital. She calmly explained the procedure, the risk and cost. $17,000. $17,000 which I did not plan for. $17,000 which was due before the surgery. The following day at about 3 p.m., she was quite annoyed when she came to and realized I was capturing her ordeal. The surgery was successful. By the next day, the world was greeted by her larger-than-life smile once again. Even my smile returned, considering we had health insurance and Tapio Hospital's $17,000 bill was paid with only 20% payable by us. When it mattered most, health insurance and a seemingly overpriced private hospital saved my daughter. The scar from this bill left a bittersweet taste in my mouth for this facility for years. For 4 years, I questioned why $17,000? Why payable before? Why so costly? As I relayed the expensive ordeal to others, there were dozens of accounts of patients being depocketed while simultaneously telling stories of successful outcomes. Even though that $17,000 didn't all come from me, it left me with financial gripe. Sometime in 2024, I accidentally met the director of the board of Tapio Hospital. So naturally, I expressed my $17,000 gripe. I so wasn't prepared for the journey this conversation would lead to. For me to fully understand the $17,000 bill, Dr. Romel Daniel insisted I do a little background research to understand what existed before Tapion. How was it conceptualized, funded, built, and supported? Begrudgingly, I ended up on the doorsteps of Michael Gordon, an attorney for the past 57 years and a retired judge.
Sometime in the 80s, I met somebody who was to become a very dear friend. He was a doctor, and his name was Andrew Richardson. We shared one thing at the beginning, and that was sailing. We were both avid sailors. And we would, on a weekend, go down the coast. And Andrew's wife, by the way, was also a doctor. And sitting on the back of a boat, probably with a glass of something other than water in our hands, we talked. Andrew was a surgeon, and he practiced at Victoria. And he expressed the view that Victoria circumscribed his skill in that he could not practice medicine as he would have liked. The equipment was old, the physical surroundings were less than adequate. And from that, we started talking about the possibility of a private medical facility. Now, there are probably many birthplaces of a private medical facility, but for Andrew and myself, that was the birthplace, the back of a boat. Very quickly after that conversation started to get serious, we realized that this was not something that could be undertaken by two doctors and a lawyer. And so we expanded the conversation to include what ultimately came to be 9 doctors and a lawyer, discussing how we could come about with a private medical facility. I say private, but it wasn't so much private as outside of the reach of government.
And so began a series of nightly brainstorming sessions. They explored several locations, one being married women's quarters at VG. However, by that time, the building was in a dilapidated state.
We actually purchased land in cul-de-sac, where Peter and Company is now. But then, when we came to raise the money to build a hospital, we realized we couldn't do it. That was still the core group, that we hadn't approached the wider community at that point.
The concept of a private medical facility was not new. The St. Rose brothers and Dr. Owen King designed and built this structure as the island's first private medical facility.
They started construction of a hospital. Unfortunately, as I gather, they ran out of money, and the banks wouldn't lend them more money for a hospital, but would lend more money for a hotel, hence Tapion Reef Hotel. But they were not doing well, and I think were quite happy to negotiate the sale of the structure to what became Medical Associates.
They reached the stage where a price was agreed to, and the rest of us were contacted. We were shown the figures that indicated the expected return, but at that time, quite honestly, I don't think that many of us expected a return on our investment at all. The initial funding was fairly quickly raised. I think the shares were possibly kept to the limit required of a private company, 50 shareholders, and between them they raised the 2 million, 2.5 million, whatever might have been required, and the bank lent the rest.
The original Medical Associates team consisted of 9 doctors: Stephen King, M. Score Remy, Andrew Richardson, Trona Bennett, Owen King, Leslie Bishop, Martin Didier, Marie Grandison Didier, Jacqueline Bird, and one lawyer, Michael Gordon. Subsequently, they were joined by Dr. Leonard Suraj. Now that they had identified a location, all they needed was a couple $1 million to get it started. Then, St Lucia's finance genius was added to the mix.
One of the original members of the core group knew George Theophilus very well and approached him from the point of view of helping to raise money. And George, as you know, is very much into finance. He was brilliant. And he set up a structure for us which fundamentally allowed us to go to people and say, well, we're thinking of doing this. Would you mind? Would you like to invest in it? And amazingly, we got 40 or 50 persons who actually were prepared to put up their money.
Why would you invest into a facility that presented no viable prospect of return?
I suppose really it was how should I put it? It was personal because I wanted a facility with doctors whom I knew, who'd be on the ground floor of the facility, to look after my family members if they became ill in conditions which I thought were suitable, and in conditions also which suited St Lucia's fast developing tourist sector. I mean, if you become ill in a country away from home and you have to spend 4 days in hospital, if you have a bad experience, you spread that far and wide when you get home, as with a good experience. And so anybody who went to Victoria at that time would not have been able to spread good news about Victoria. And so therefore I was willing to put money in it, acknowledging that the money would probably never yield a dividend and might even be lost altogether. And I think most of the other members of my circle were of like mind.
Ferrell Charles, Charmaine Gardner, the Doubelet brothers, Arnott Valmore, Michael Chasney, Clinton Shalry, Christopher Renwick, Gus Justin, and Herbert Marius were some of the original investors. They all coughed up between $30,000 to $150,000 each without the guarantee of a dividend for the foreseeable future.
The persons who were attracted or who contributed to this idea were all persons approaching middle age. Persons who had probably had, in one way or another, experiences with Victoria Hospital. So that the concept of a private medical facility was attractive to them, but nobody had ever put it together before. So that when they were approached, I think they saw it as not only benefiting themselves physically and personally, but benefiting a wider community.
In 1996, Tapion Hospital opened its doors to the public, offering a 30-bed facility. The hospital provided various room configurations including private, semi-private and shared accommodations. It was equipped with 2 advanced operating rooms for surgical procedures and a dedicated suite for labor and delivery.
Sometimes you might have 5 patients, 2 people, because at that time most of it would be like elective. We did not have emergency. At that time, initial stages of Tapion, there were no emergency surgery, you know. And even when patients were coming in, they were asked to call to make, you know, so that we would know that we are expecting a patient.
By 1997, the emergency room was officially opened. Interestingly, some of the founding shareholders had to man the new ER.
Now you can imagine, Dale, I'm a pathologist. I had to take my turn on the rota and revert back to when I was a district medical officer in Soufrière and practice good old-fashioned medicine
On people who are alive.
of people who are alive.
Because the doctor can not let you play my boyo. Are you alive? The doctor can have to touch me? No. I'm kicking and screaming.
So it was very interesting.
Then, the emergency room management fell on the shoulders of Dr. Garvin Melville. Today, the 5-bed ER is run by Dr. Alwyn Benjamin and a team of 4 doctors, 6 nurses, and 4 health aides.
Being small is actually the gift and the curse, because being small means that you could get individual attention. The wait time or the boarding time from coming to the ER, or what we call door to doctor time, is a lot shorter than the public service, and which is what people need in an emergency setting. So the size is actually an advantage because it cuts down the wait time, or time to diagnosis and time to treatment. So that is actually an advantage. But size as well in terms of a mass casualty can be the disadvantage as well.
Tapion Hospital embodies the mall concept hospital design, mirroring the layout of a shopping mall by bringing together a diverse range of healthcare services and retail outlets under a single roof.
When it first started, because it was a new concept, what we call a mall, financially a mall concept, whereby Tapion wanted to have minimum amount of control over the doctors, in the sense that not hiring them and not managing them, but give them an outlet to practice their skill. And Tapion Hospital or Medical Associate would form the standard bearer, would establish what standard you must operate on to operate here. And each person, each operator or each practitioner was given or entered into a contract.
This medical facility boasts its own radiology department with CT scanners, color Doppler, mammography, and ultrasound. There are departments for pediatrics, dermatology, ear, nose, and throat, ophthalmology, pathology, obstetrics and gynecology, orthopedics, surgery, internal medicine, and cardiology departments, to name a few. But interestingly, many of the doctors who operate here also practice at the public hospital, which begs the question.
Dr. Suraj, you spoke of the standard of care, but there is a dichotomy of service because you have doctors who operate here and operate in the public sector. How do you manage their brain level of service between there and here?
Well, it has to do with the personality remains the same. It has to do with the condition of service where you're working. You'd find that the government sector would be much more volume of work. And as a result, you will find that there'll be a little more rushed. For example, you go to casualty in the government sector and then you're asked to give an appointment to see a doctor. It might not be until 3, 4, 5 months before you see that doctor because of the scheduling and the workload. And in the private sector, it may just be the same day, the day after, or at most a week or 2.
When we return, I ask the blunt questions.
Dr. Plummer, why is Tapio so significantly more expensive than OKEU?
That's a very, very important question.
And later, 5 doctors sing a chorus.
Unfortunately, you're asking me a very unfair question.
That's a good question.
It's such a great question.
Have plans of buying land or owning your home in the near future? Then invest in a fixed housing assistance program now. This is a tax-exempt investment which Fix has introduced in response to the future housing needs to the youth. The program is a 5-year facility which accumulates savings for house construction or house and land purchase. You must be a first-time home buyer and a resident of St Lucia. No withdrawal of savings is permitted within the 5-year period. For more advice on investing in a fixed housing assistance program, call Fix today at 458-8700 458-8740 or email info@fixlimited.com. Located on number 15 Bridge Street in Castries and in the Providence Commercial Center in Rodney Bay, Grizzly. Fix, firm and upright.
Our palm went too cold. Alexa, where can I find a solar water heater?
Let me find out. I'm only seeing one, Tropical Solar. They have the best solar water heater, providing hot water, rain or shine.
Is there one big enough for my entire family?
Actually, Tropical Solar offers 35 to 85 gallon systems, perfect for any home.
How quickly can I get one?
The hot water system is installed within 24 to 48 hours of purchase. They are located in View Fort, Castries, and Rosie Lay.
Thanks, Alexa. Jale.
%70 of all health decisions are influenced by lab results. Delivery of accurate, reliable, and timely results has been our mandate for over 20 years. We are Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited, generating hundreds of lab tests each year while delivering quality, personalized, confidential service, one client at a time. With a reliable network of regional and international partners, all tests are conducted with patient care in mind. Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited, saving lives and caring for people. We focus on results so you can focus on what's important. Telephone 459-2200.
Since 1996, this facility has offered the alternative to public health care, conceptualized by 9 doctors and a lawyer, and funded by a hodgepodge of St Lucians with deep pockets.
To this day, Tapio carries the stigma of expense. Built by the rich, for the rich. Do you agree with the statement?
Clearly not. However, I do accept that medical health, medical attention is very expensive. Tell you a story. I was talking to a very good friend of mine earlier this week. He was a St Lucian but has lived in the United States for a long time. And he had had some problem with his heart, or he thought he had. Went into hospital, stayed there for 3 days, had a procedure of some kind or another, and came back out, told he was fine. I said, I hope you had insurance. He said, well, put it this way. If I didn't have insurance, I would be dead. I said, what do you mean? The bill was $140,000 US for 3 days. That puts it in context. As I tried to explain to you, just having equipment available, drugs available, doctors available, all of these things cost money. Yes, it is expensive, but it's no, put it this way, if it were a money-making machine, we would have been paying out dividends year after year after year. We don't. The dividends are small, they're tiny in terms of percentage of investment.
Over time, the investors have encouraged the hospital's management to reinvest and form strategic alliances in services that are advantageous to St. Lucia. This collaboration enabled them to set up the only hyperbaric chamber in the OECS.
A hyperbaric chamber, in essence, is a submarine in reverse. It's an airtight chamber made of either steel, as in our case, or acrylic, that allows us to increase the pressure inside the chamber. When we increase the pressure inside the chamber, it allows us to use oxygen to treat several different conditions. one example of how it works is there's a condition called necrotizing fasciitis in which bacteria gain entry into the skin. They kill people. In fact, necrotizing fasciitis kills more than half of the people that get it. So what we are able to do in the chamber is put those patients in, give them oxygen, and that oxygen, because of the increase in pressure, is able to diffuse and go into parts of the tissue that won't necessarily get oxygen if you were just breathing oxygen from a mask. And in so doing, it reduces the inflammation, reduces the swelling, and kills the bacteria.
The bends or decompression sickness affects divers when nitrogen bubbles form in the body due to rapid ascent from deep dives. This condition can impact various body parts, including joints and organs, leading to symptoms ranging from pain to severe complications. Treatment involves a hyperbaric chamber, which uses high pressure and pure oxygen to dissolve nitrogen bubbles, alleviating symptoms and preventing tissue damage.
Before 2008, what existed?
There was nothing in existence. There were no chambers available on island. So as a consequence, fishermen had two choices basically. Either try to get to Barbados as soon as possible. There is a chamber there that the Bajan Army, I think, utilized, and they could be treated there. Or they could be treated in Martinique if they could get across to Martinique. So if you couldn't fly to one of those two places, treatment was not an option.
Significant funds have been allocated to establish one of the most well-equipped intensive care units in the region.
It gives everybody a certain level of comfort knowing that a patient can now come off a cruise ship. They're critical. We house them in the ICU. We take extremely good care of them until they can now be airlifted to their next port of call. Our pacemaker thing, which has always been there, that exists. We've added in a new state-of-the-art CT, which gives the most amazing images you can ever see. And it gives the doctors a lot more information.
A 128-slice CT scanner revolutionizes medical imaging by offering high-resolution images at unprecedented speeds, significantly enhancing diagnostic capabilities across a range of conditions. Its ability to capture detailed cross-sectional images quickly improves patient comfort and reduces radiation exposure. Additionally, its advanced 3D imaging and dynamic capabilities facilitate precise surgical planning and the evaluation of moving organs like the heart, making it an invaluable tool in modern medicine for both diagnostics and treatment planning.
We're, I would say, 95% there with regards to starting cardiac catheterization. And again, we need the ICU because once you've stented a patient, they need to be in ICU. So everything sort of builds on one. So you put the ICU in and then you can now expand your services. And soon to come, we want to start a stroke center, and again, hopefully by the end of the month, that will be announced. And again, you have a stroke center, you need somewhere to put the patient after you've thrombolized them or dissolved the clot, and so that's where ICU comes in. So the ICU was the base, and now we can start to build on that from there.
Additionally, the hospital entered uncharted territory in preventative medical care.
We have just embarked on a partnership or an agreement with a group of neurologists that will work with our internists currently to treat a stroke at almost from the first time you suspect that it's happening. So from the time when you were seen normal by an individual or you feel certain symptoms like headache, weakness, seizure, or any of these symptoms, and an observer or the last person to have seen you in a normal state or and you were brought to the door of this institution. They call it from last being seen well to the institution. As long as that time period is within a specific period, which it varies for every individual, and some intervention takes place where you could put a clotting dissolving material into the bloodstream. It can help unclog the blood vessel, and in a certain number of cases reverse the irrigation of that part of the brain that was damaged, and so speaking reverse a progressing stroke.
In 2024, the hospital also introduced a catheterization laboratory, or cath lab, which is a specialized facility where various diagnostic and therapeutic procedures related to the heart are performed. The cath lab plays a critical role in diagnosing and treating heart diseases without the need for open heart surgery, offering a minimally invasive approach. This not only reduces the risk and recovery time for patients, but also improves the precision and outcomes of cardiac treatments.
The cath lab is the beginning, as far as I'm concerned, of cardiac surgery. So you have a cath lab, so you can put dye into the heart. You can see where the narrowing is. You can, if anything, you can put in stents, make some changes initially, and then you can have cardiac surgery developing. But in addition to that, we have such a high rate of diabetes. We have such a high amputation rate in St Lucia. Instead of being amputated, a lot of people, basically, if you can get the blood flowing again, you'll be able to do it. So for cath lab, you can see where it is, you can put in the stent, and so you can save limbs.
Truthfully, I was very impressed with the historical context of the Tapion story. Who would have thought that the vision for this private hospital would have started at the back of a sailboat? Romel insisted I conduct extensive interviews to understand the progress and development of Tapion and how this facility has reduced the need to travel overseas for medical attention. Indeed, I was doubtful and I recognized the doctor's bias. So, I went all the way down to Marigot Bay to meet Greg Glass, a businessman with a bottomless pocket and a US visa. Greg has been under the knife a few times. In 2022, he traveled to Florida, had an operation and returned to St Lucia. Days later, he discovered that his initial diagnosis and treatment did not solve his medical issue. Dr. Romel Daniel intervened.
He found out it was my gallbladder. I told him, what are you talking about? We never think of gallbladder. I felt quite healthy otherwise. Scheduled me for operation immediately. Within 2 days, he had an operation to take off my gallbladder. And he told me if we didn't do that, later on he said if we didn't do that, you possibly wouldn't live for another week. That was my big problem there. And when he told me exactly what happened and showed me what they pulled out of me, I was shocked. I said, these guys are good. You know, and me, with all the resources I have, I can afford to go to Miami, but I wouldn't do it. Right now, I wouldn't leave and go to Miami unless the doctor here told me to go to Miami.
And what of the cost? How do you compare the cost of Tapion versus that of the United States?
Before I would leave to go to Miami, I would rather operate here. Cost-wise, I'll tell people, you save yourself a hell of a lot. It may seem expensive because of St Lucia, but I don't think going to Miami is a very good idea. If you can get your operation done at Tapion, you can do it.
Every investigative production advises to track the financial trail. In my research, I discovered that this hospital had been hemorrhaging money for years, and between 2013 and 2016, the hospital made financial losses in the millions.
At the time, Tapion Hospital was effectively bankrupt, or essentially bankrupt. We were operating at the pleasure of the bank, and only because the bank allowed it.
I don't think it is complacency, but I think that there were areas we went into that we were not we didn't do all the homework. I mean, a classic one I think was versus Sweets. I don't think that we did the homework, and I think that we didn't pay enough attention to cash flow.
If you come in here for care and your bill is $40,000 at the end of the day, and you leave, and you are well, how will you pay that bill? Will you pay that bill? When will you pay that bill? Because the hospital has already expended much of that money. $35,000 has already been spent on salaries, supplies, various other things that you required for your care. So the institution has to carry that, whether you pay or not. And that is part of the problem why I think Tapion started a process of payment up front and pay as you go. It'll be interesting for you to see the books through the years of Tapion Hospital, to see the levels of receivables, the debt that the hospital carries on behalf of patients who won't pay or have not paid. And hence, those draconian steps to make sure that bills are paid.
When we return, Tapion Hospital is on the brink of closure. A financial hatchet man is called in, and later, Tapion is sued for $40 million.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again.
How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I went through, you were standing there by my side, and now you gon' be with me for the last ride.
So let the light guide your way. Yeah. Hold every memory as you go, and every road you take will always lead you home. Oh, it's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again.
As a parent, good health is my primary desire for my children, and it is my job to protect them. But skipping or spacing out our children's immunization means they're more likely to get sick from serious diseases like measles, mumps, and whooping cough. And they can spread these diseases to newborns and other people who cannot be vaccinated. I made sure my children's shots were on time and up to date. You too should ensure your children's vaccines are on time and up to date.
Introducing the new and delicious Marigot Bay Rum Creams. True St Lucian flavor. Available island-wide.
Reginald Saint-Gis has been an accountant for 43 years. He worked in the hospitality industry for 10 years as a cost control specialist. In 2016, he was tasked with revamping the St Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation, which had suffered losses for 12 straight years. Within 2 years, Reggie managed to transform it into a profitable entity. Then, he was assigned to reorganize the struggling Poverty Reduction Fund, another government social initiative. Given his track record, The Tapion Hospital Board viewed Reggie as their beacon of hope.
What did you find when you got here? Financially, how were they doing?
In a nutshell, they were bankrupt. That's a direct answer. They were bankrupt. I give you an example. You write a check under $500 and it's not appreciated by the bank. It will not be accepted. Clear. You owed your suppliers above the $1 million mark. Your pharmacy virtually empty. And your pharmacy is supposed to be your cash cow, but virtually empty. That's your means of survival. Your staffing levels, very high. In fact, I always said that in this environment, the threshold should be 41.7% when it comes to staffing, salaries versus revenue. I made it at 61%. That was tough. So basically, every 61 cents on every dollar went out to pay staffing. One of the immediate solutions would be to have a staff audit. Unfortunate, because it means retrenching. Tapion Hospital had 24 beds, 9 rooms. 9 rooms, 24 beds. But your housekeeping department, probably about 17 persons at a time. So what, economies of scale, economy, you can't do that. You cannot survive in that manner. So the hard decision had to be taken. Every single department had to have been examined. And what we had to do was call persons in, offer them termination packages. We had what we call professional physicians, like anesthetists, right? Who were on salary. But there's no operational procedure, right, to justify the salaries that they were making. You had no choice but to call them in and offer them a different package, i.e., if Dale comes to the hospital and he has to go through the anesthetic procedures, we would pay him per patient.
What was the pushback on the ground?
All negative. All negative. Silent. It was silent, right? It was behind the back kind of you know what I mean? But I've been accustomed to that.
By 2016, the hospital was burdened with outstanding receivables amounting to millions of dollars. In a more troubling move, it had enlisted a foreign debt collection agency to recover some of these funds, forfeiting 15 cents on every dollar collected. Recognizing this approach as unsustainable, the so-called hatchet man terminated the services and took on the primary responsibility for debt collection.
I was stern. I would call you myself. If Dale Elliott owes me and I see him in the lobby, I will go and sit with him nicely, whisper in his ears, you have some money for me. All right? But there's a new sheriff on the dock. You need to pay up your bill. If you don't pay up your bill, you might have difficulties coming back in here. Okay? Sad reality. You get people coming to pay. You cannot run an establishment with in excess of $3 million in receivables. You cannot. Especially when you have a high overdraft situation. Okay? So you feed in an overdraft at 19.5% because you are beyond your limit. Yet people are not paying interest. You owe me $30,000. I can knock off, if you pay me within 3 months, I can knock off $5,000 for you. Once you say yes, you come, you sign a document. If you stick to that agreement, we're good. If you breach it by 1 day, I reinstate the $5,000 that I gave you discount on. Because we had an agreement based on what's presented in front of us.
Accreditation certification is important to hospitals because not only does it signify a commitment to setting standards, but it ensures that patients are given the best possible care within the confines of the institutions. It involves a rigorous evaluation of a hospital's procedures, policies, and outcomes against established best practices. Annual accreditation comes at a hefty cost.
My role as the quality control officer is to continue the work of Accreditation Canada. I have to audit, and at the end of the audit, I've got my report. And areas where there was non-compliance, I report to the ward manager, and we call the nurses involved, we show them the problem, and we provide solution to the problem. So that next month when I audit, there should be no shortcomings there.
In the absence of accreditation, hospitals can maintain high care standards by implementing internal quality assurance programs to regularly assess and improve patient care and safety, and investing in the continuous professional development of staff to keep abreast of the latest clinical advancements and patient safety protocols. Tapion Hospital created a special post of Quality Control Officer.
I think it's opportune to say how grateful I personally feel to the staff of the hospital, because they made the greatest sacrifice. Mr. St. Gis orchestrated and directed those changes, but the people that made the sacrifice were the staff, who had to suffer through some of those cutbacks, because it was essentially it was the staff blood that was on the floor, but they persisted.
I think the measures he did worked well for us, and it took us from one level to another level in less than 3 years. Because I must say, even during the COVID period, and during the time we were almost at the brink of bankruptcy and return, we took a pay cut. And being the money it was just a temporary pay cut, and at the end, when we got back to a state of normalcy, the money that was taken away from us was refunded. He gave us that money back. So in spite of his austerity measures, he has a heart there.
By the time you were ready to leave, was the hospital in the black?
Dale, time I was ready to leave, I was comfortable that the hospital was on upward trajectory. Right? We had moved from the red into the black. We were able, okay, let me put it this way. The bank couldn't talk to us. And that's just being blunt. The bank couldn't talk to us. The same bank that was charging us 19.5% on an overdraft, it called us for business. But we had options at that point to decide who we go with. So I can say, by the time I left, Tapion was and remains comfortable in terms of manning their own operations without the hindrances or without the how you say it, overseeing by the financial institutions as to the operations.
In researching this hospital, I also discovered that Tapion has had some close shaves with financial ruin over the years. Paul Sterling, an employee of Royal Caribbean Cruises Limited, became seriously ill on the Explorer of the Seas and was taken to Tapion Hospital on April 3, 2010. Platinum Ports Agency coordinated his transfer, guaranteeing payment for his medical expenses. Despite treatment, Sterling's condition necessitated evacuation to the US for further care. In December 2012, Royal Caribbean Cruises sued Medical Associates Tapion Hospital and some of its doctors, claiming Sterling's treatment led to severe health issues necessitating lifelong medical support. They claimed damages of $15 million US.
So the patient came off a ship, and I would say that he was handed over to us, but we were not given the full picture because a lot of it was verbal. The documentation was poor from the ship. We housed the patient, I would say, and this is about 5 to 7 days. In that time, there was lots of crosstalk in trying to get him out of the island. Sometimes there's pushback from insurance companies, so they were resisting getting him out. And I think in the time that he was here, he deteriorated somewhat. By the time he got to the US, in evaluating him over the next few days, they thought that he had some degree of brain injury. What we don't have is documentation. Well, we have documentation of him leaving here. We don't have any documentation of what happened in the 2 or 3 hours between here and Miami. And then we have documentation on the other side. So he left here in one piece, and then he got there not in one piece.
But what was even more interesting is that the aircraft owners who were responsible for the transport changed the name, so it became defunct. We could not get any idea as to what happened between him leaving here and going across there.
In a dramatic legal showdown reminiscent of David versus Goliath, Tapion Hospital emerged victorious against a formidable lawsuit filed by a major US-based medical insurance company. The claim amount threatened to bankrupt the institution. However, Tapion's local legal team comprising Jeffrey Dubele, Sadia Snack, Michelle Anthony and Anthony Astefan QC, alongside a dedicated group of medical experts from Tapion and colleagues from Barbados, Trinidad and Martinique, mounted a robust defense. Their scientific and professional presentations in court significantly influenced the insurance company's decision to settle for an amount in line with their legal cost. This legal battle, which spanned a decade, not only underscored the resilience and expertise of Tapion Hospital staff, but also highlighted the strength of their care system and documentation standards. When we return, I ask the $17,000 question.
Are you steel bending and cutting on your construction site? At Caribbean Metals Limited, we use state-of-the-art technology and machinery to fabricate all the steel you need for your foundation. Starter bars, U-links, stirrups, columns, beams, and any bent bar. Reduce your project time, cost, and material. Let Caribbean Metals bend your steel and increase your savings significantly. Come in, call, email. We will do the rest. Caribbean Metals Limited. We've got you covered. Guaranteed.
Dr. Plummer, why is Tapion so significantly more expensive than OKEU?
OKEU is significantly subsidized by our taxpayers' money. OKU undercharges for almost everything. As a matter of fact, people believe that you go to OKU and there's no need to pay for health. It's a culture we have developed, and through no fault of the population, but through guidance from other executives, that make people believe without paying a medical insurance, you're entitled to free health care. But any other institution in the world where it's alleged that health care is free or it's subsidized by a certain degree, the taxpayer, meaning you and me, pay for it beforehand.
If you go to the Victoria Hospital with a child that needs a tonsillectomy, the the tonsillectomy will cost the child $250 with 1 or 2 nights in hospital. Studies have shown that this procedure and the entire care may have costed the hospital about $4,000, but it is heavily discounted, and therefore you pay $250. So if a similar procedure is done at Tapion that costs $4,000, it sounds like a tremendously inflated cost. But what you have to look at in all that is cost of service.
At any public hospital, somebody has to buy the gauze, they have to buy the syringes, they have to buy the medicine, they have to pay the staff, they have to pay for the conditioning, they have to pay for every single individual item that participates in the care of any patient. For the most part, in public institutions, we're shielded from that cost. We don't know what it is. I don't think anybody, I've never seen a figure. I've asked, but I've never seen a figure for the actual cost of care at a public hospital in St. Lucia. How much does it actually cost in items, in time, in salaries, and everything else for a patient to be seen in the emergency room, be admitted, be treated, have surgery, whatever it is, and be discharged afterwards? What is the actual cost? We don't know. So I think as a result of that, when presented with actual costs, the response is, this is expensive.
An average day in ICU in the US costs about 10,000 US per day. Yes? We're talking about somebody who's on a ventilator. So you have oxygen, you have the ventilator, you have one-on-one nursing, you have a nursing aide, you have the ICU doctor, you have an intensivist who's involved with you. If it's a surgical case, you have a surgeon who's involved with you as well, and you're getting one-on-one care. Our costs are nowhere near $10,000 a day, but if anybody were to come here, even myself, it would seem exorbitant, the price per day in ICU. But you have to understand the resources that go into that. And we are not operating in a silo. All our equipment, all our the ventilators, the ICU beds, all of those things come from the very same place that costs their stuff at $10,000 a day. It costs money to keep patients alive in ICU. There's a lot of resources that go into it.
The story of Tapion Hospital emerges as a beacon of human endeavor, resilience, and the unwavering spirit to care, born from the dreams of grey-haired visionaries. This narrative is more than a hospital's history. It's a testament to the communal heartbeat that propels societies forward. The origins of Tapion, conceived on the deck of a sailing boat, reflect the journey from idealism to reality. It underscores a fundamental truth. Great achievements are often rooted in simple yet profound conversations. The hospital's founding, fraught with financial hurdles and driven by a collective will, mirrors the broad narrative of healthcare, where ambition meets the stark realities of funding and sustainability. The saga of Tapion, its near brushes with financial insolvency, and the relentless pursuit of excellence in care parallel the complexities of modern healthcare systems worldwide. The challenges of balancing cost with quality care, the ethical quandaries of prepayment for services, and the strategic necessity of reinvestment in cutting-edge facilities and life-saving technologies are universal themes. Tapion Hospital's story is also a clarion call for a deeper reflection on the value of health beyond the immediacy of treatment cost. It prompts us to consider the broader implications of healthcare financing, the hidden costs borne by public institutions, and the real price of maintaining standards of care that honor the dignity of every patient. Tapion exemplifies the intricate dance between cost and care, the delicate interplay of individuals' needs and collective resources, and the perennial quest to bridge the gap between what is and what could be. In the stories of its founders, investors, caregivers, and patients, we find the indubitable spirit that defines our collective pursuit of health and well-being. It's a narrative that resonates beyond the confines of Tapion, echoing in the corridors of hospitals worldwide, in the hearts of those who dare to dream, and in the lives of those touched by the healing hands of medicine. Tapion's tale is more than a chronicle of a hospital. It is a beacon of hope, a reminder of our shared vulnerabilities, and a tribute to the relentless human spirit that thrives when it matters most.
The full has never been told. Could go on and on, the full has never been told. Could go on and on, the full has never been told. Could go on and on, the full has never been